Hello, I'm Professor Lieu. I'm here today with a special guest artist, Kang, and we are going to do a video today about a series of pen drawings that Song did recently that were inspired by the coronavirus. If you would like to grow as an artist, but you can't afford an art class, or if you're trapped indoors like the whole planet right now, we've got everything you need to keep you occupied, critiques, and tutorials. Okay, I'm just going to show you guys really briefly the series of images that Song created. So it's a triptych. There are three images, and we have this first image here. This is the second, and this is the third. But before we dig into Song's technique and inspiration, I think, Song, you should tell everybody how we met.
So, Clara was my professor my second semester at USD. So, first semester, I got very arrogant. I was like, okay, I understand how the school system works. I understand like what my limits are. I can do this. And it's a drawing class. Clara taught us drawing. So I went in there pretty like confident, like borderline cocky. But then first project, she makes us do a drawing that was 4 by like 3 feet, and then she was like, "All right, you got a week to do this. Bring it back. Texture. I want something interesting." I'm like, "What does this mean?" But then I wanted to impress her, so I went all for it, and then like really attacked this piece, and then I got a pretty good crit, and I was really proud of it. But then she kept going with that intensity. So each week we got another like 4 by 3 feet, 5 by 6 feet kind of intense drawings, all within like a week or two time limit. And it really just set the tone. But it really kind of made me respect the process a lot more, understand what I was doing, like see where I should push like texture, like be more fluid. So it really kind of helped me release that like hyper detailed tendencies that I used to have, or I still have, that I prefer to
I
have.
think it's a little bit of an
So,
understatement,
yeah,
Song, but we will let our audience
maybe. I don't know.
decide.
It definitely.
These images, by the way,
Yeah.
that I've been scrolling through as Song was talking, these were all pieces that Song did in my class as a freshman. So you never know where all that stuff you do in class is going to end up someday. Just a little warning. And by the way, one of the reasons we brought Song on today, other than the fact that she's fabulous and amazing, is that we just recently released this tutorial on Scratchboard with Song and myself, mostly me just watching. I got to do the easy part. And so Song demonstrates all these brilliant cross hatching techniques. We talk about different ways to compose images. So if you guys like Song's work, I definitely would encourage you to watch this tutorial because you'll learn a lot about drawing. And also, at some point, we will release this pen and ink drawing tutorial at some point. So there's much more to come here from Song. Okay, Song, let's talk about this coronavirus triptych. How did you get the idea to get started with this?
I think we all understand like being stir crazy at our house. But the thing is, I'm usually very comfortable at home. Like I could stay months at a time without complaining, just going out for a walker, like and just kind of enjoy nature whenever I want to. But I think the pressure of not being allowed to go outside suddenly like caged me in. And then that really made being outside more daunting, like a sudden responsibility that I need to like protect my health, protect others by being indoors. But then everything looks so peaceful outside, so it's like a weird headspace. So I, yeah, I personally like being at home, but then I suddenly found myself being very uncomfortable just because that restriction
Well,
was
I wondered,
placed.
Song, can you talk a little bit about your visual references? Because I think what's really stunning about your work is that it is very much grounded in nature and organic forms, and yet there is something very almost haunting and ethereal about these images. So, what do you use as references?
For referencing, it's just I prefer to draw organic shapes, and that's mostly out of habit because when you doodle and like homework or scratch sheet of paper, instead of doing like architectural, like accurate mathematically, like geometric kind of shapes, I always lean towards like little swirly kind of curvatures. And also it's a habit that I picked up after I started using like nib pens because like the blade, if you move a certain direction, like the ink will splatter and it's really inconvenient. So you do kind of have to work in a slightly curved aspect. So like that kind of like habitual like hatching motion came out of that. As far as like the nature referencing, like it just makes me happy to draw plants. I think it's also you can draw a leaf inaccurately, like, and no one can know. No one will tell me that I drew a leaf like really wrong. It could be an interpretation, it could just be a weird angle or like a rotten part. Like you can't tell me like if I drew somebody's like a skull or an anatomy piece, then people will be like, oh, that shoulder is really wonky. That doesn't look purposeful. So plants are like my comfort
And not
subject to
just any
draw.
plants. These images that I'm showing all of you guys right now, this is your own garden. These are house plants that you have. And so you're not just going onto Google and Googling trees. These are plants that you live with. Why do you think that matters?
That's all the plants I see right now. So it's kind of just like working with what you're limited with. Except I will say the one plant I don't have that I needed to look up reference for is the Monstera plant. And that's like the one with like the it looks very like what would you say? It looks like some like a bug ate into the leaf. So it's like all holy. That plant, I want one, but I've never got one. So that's my dream plant. Other than that, it's just things that are around me. And it also happens that my studio desk is right in front of a window. So I'm always looking out into the backyard. So I'm always seeing green. It's just like it helps you with your eyesight too. Just kind of like letting your eyes relax. It's just things that helps me like feel
Ripple of
happiness.
Aqua is saying, I love the visual, but I really want to hear about Song's reason for choosing those kinds of uncomfortable and not home body seats. What do you think, Song? Why those chairs?
Because I'm not comfortable at home right now. I think I really wanted to. I played around with different shapes of chairs. I want to, like, for each piece, maybe like play around with maybe a stool. And then for the last one, maybe like a really nice, cushy armchair. But I think just I wanted that chair to kind of represent me just moving around in front of my window, just staring out, and just kind of being that structure to ground that very organic, fluid piece. So like for the first image where like the chair's just leaning and then it's just looking out the window, I didn't really want any attention to be on the rest of the image. It's just all my focus is outside. All my like tension and worries are outside. So like I wanted the most basic simple things to be incorporated into the
Well, I
interior.
feel like one of the things that really caught my eye in this composition is actually just the white space is so important in this piece because it really accentuates how just monstrous the coronavirus cells are on the outside of the window. And so I think that it's a really beautiful balance in that sense. So let's talk a little bit about your drawing supplies because I've got this big chart here. We've got bristle board, triangle, pencil, ruler, painter's tape, micron pens, Tombow, markers, erasers, Faber-Castell. How do you know what supplies to use? Because you did the scratchboard tutorial for us. Sometimes you're using that medium and stuff, but why these supplies?
I don't have an accurate chart, but there are some brands that release slightly lighter blacks,
Oh,
if that
totally.
makes sense. Like the Micron, yeah, so it also depends on like the nib size. The Micron like 003 is very like if you come like even if you color in a whole square block, like pitch black, it's still slightly lighter than if you went with like a Micron like what's like the brush pens like the micron brush or like a micron like 1 or like 00 like 08 size where it's bigger nibs like the ink deposits are a lot darker and then even between brands like Faber-Castell they like their brush pens or like even their smaller nibs are slightly just very slightly darker and less less matte So like in a way, I didn't particularly like mixing Micron and Faber-Castell because Faber-Castell has like a glossy sheen to it if you color in too much, especially the bigger nibs or like the brush ones. So like in if you scan it, it's very difficult because you have to do a lot of editing where it's like a weird gray smudge from the microns with like this pitch shiny black in another corner. And then even as like a foot like if you photograph it, it doesn't photograph well. So like it can be managed, but I prefer not to. So I do a lot of trial runs
I
between
feel like you
pens.
know more about the differences between each pen brand than probably anyone on the planet because you just logged so many hours with every single brand of pen. Let's see. In the chat, Lisa is saying the empty chair feels like someone is missing. Yeah, I felt that too, that there's a real loneliness to this image. And I think, Song, what really struck me about this image is that you're talking about home as usually being such a comfortable place, and yet all of a sudden that home has been transformed into having a completely different type of atmosphere. So you actually did this other drawing that did not make it into the triptych. You decided to actually abandon this drawing and not make it part of the series. So why did you decide to do that?
So this was the one that I wanted to try a different chair, like a stool. So like this was my original plan of kind of incorporating chair as like a personality for each stage. So this was going to represent the second stage where the outside doesn't really matter and I'm trying to focus on what's going inside my house. And then but the thing is my house became like a literal cage. So this is where I went kind of obvious the window is the cage. That's kind of lame, but like work with me here, right? So I'm playing around with window shapes. I'm like, what is the most obvious thing I can say without making people like kind of question me? Make it like a window cage. But then because the inside is so daunting, because like I'm trying to not think about the outside. So I'm trying to work on like my actual responsibilities. I have bills to pay. I have to like file my taxes and then I still get some freelance work done. I still want to do some social media once in a while. And then suddenly like all these small little things start to build up. So this piece, I don't like it because it's so literal. Like the stacks of books on top of a stool, that's literally representing like the responsibilities are stacking up. And then like I did manage to capture that kind of dark gloomy atmosphere that I wanted, but it was almost too dark where it kind of felt cheesy. It was just like I like just because my house is uncomfortable, I'm not like locked in here. Like I can kind of like it's still my home. I'm still grateful to like have a shelter and I still have food. I'm like okay, like it's not that big of a deal right now. So like this piece kind of felt over dramatic. It was like kind of like just sit down, like you need to
Well,
calm
so I'm
down.
wondering, Song, because
So
I think it's pretty obvious looking at these images that you did spend a long time on this drawing, even though you decided ultimately for it to not be part of the series. How do you do that? Because I feel like a lot of people would say, well, hang on, I spent so much time on this. That was such a waste, and I'm so frustrated. So I guess I better make it part of the series. Like, how are you able to take something that you spent that much time on and say, nope, it's not part of the series? How do you do that?
first off, I'm so mad, Clara. I am so mad. This piece, really, this I think out of all of them, this piece took the longest just because I was so mad at it, like so
What were you
frustrated
so
where it was
mad about,
going. Like
though?
the other ones, no, like the other ones were just like, oh yeah, like it felt like a sweet spot. Like I knew what was going on. Like I liked the gradients that was happening. I liked the textures, but I also liked the composition. This one, like actually like after doing the sketch and as soon as I started like putting down the dark blacks, I started to get mad. And that like first mad like first strike was when like the different inks started to like not match up. Like the Faber Castell was so glossy and the microns just did not mix at that point. But then I was trying to make it work. Like I was pushing through because at that point it was already like 4 hours in, right? So and then after that, like I as I was getting to like 90%, you get to that stage where like hey, trying to convince yourself that it's okay. That like you know,
Total
like
denial,
this
right?
piece is fine and then you're just over exaggerating. Yeah, so like imagine working on something for like 6 or 7 hours and then like by the time you're like you're almost done, you're like yeah, that 7 hours matter. Like this piece works. But then like stop ballooning yourself. Like this piece isn't what you imagine. So like just set it down and then maybe work on something else or do a second draft. That will make you happy. And that's what I
Ashley is
did.
saying it's so
So
frustrating
that's
when you push through and still hate it. Does that sound familiar, song?
oh yeah. No, I seriously like it was even at like when I was editing, when I was scanning, I started to get mad, especially because I was gonna post it that day. It was around like 1 a.m. I was like, oh, I posted something yesterday. Wow, this is gonna be 2 days in a row. I did like a drawing and I wanted to show it off. But then I looked at it and I was just like, this just isn't it. So like I stopped myself from posting. I stopped my friend like from showing it to this one person that I was like sharing my progress with. I was just like, no, I'm gonna just do it again. It really hurt me. I was so mad.
It seems like his drawing sort of
my hand
traumatized
was
you in a way.
my hand hurt so bad.
Tell us in the chat, you guys, if you ever get mad at your artwork the way Song does. Actually, you do it more often than I think you would because I feel like your work is so delicate and elegant that I find it hilarious
Oh
you
no.
getting angry at this like beautiful drawing.
It's so mad. Sometimes I like to joke that like the most calming and peaceful drawing, I'm listening to heavy metal or like a punk rock. Like you have no idea what's going on behind me. But it's just I'm usually contradicting myself as I work, but I'm very angry, and a lot of people assumed I'm very patient and then just kind of like, methodical. But like, really, my head is just like going off. It's just so like it's so chaotic
That's
up
so
there.
funny. Christina is saying, I get mad at myself. And Wilson is saying, I'm that mad at the drawing. I'm literally working on it right now as I'm watching the stream. I love that. Sterling
Oh
is
my
saying, I
god.
get
It
mad,
can be
but that's
worth
because
it.
I'm such a beginner in terms of technique. It's harder to imagine being mad at a drawing like Songs. 10,000 Crows says that they have actually punched their canvases before. And Ripple of Aqua says, I learned to talk to my work, apologize for my portraits, encourage my landscape sometimes calmly and other times desperately. Wow, that is very emotional, you guys. I love that we're all nuts. Isn't this
It's
great?
it's therapeutic. Just like a quick aside, recently I cleaned out my art storage and I still had some pieces from like high school and freshman year in college. I went at it with a hammer. Like I do not kid you, especially I'm not sure if you remember, I did like a lot of sculptural works when I was in freshman year. So they were taking up a lot of my storage, but I kept it for like sentimental reasons. I was like, no, I don't have time for your sentiments anymore. So like I went at it with like a rubber hammer and like as well as like one of those chisel things, and then just like whacked at it. Now my closet's clean and my conscience is clean. I'm no longer angry
Camden is
at
saying, I
it.
have a lot of works that I
It's
hate.
good.
Even after spending hours on pieces, I still find things I dislike. I look back at almost every piece of mine and I see things I dislike about them. Camden, I think that's really common because when I look at my work, I only see mistakes. I rarely see things that I think I did well. I mean, do you have that experience too, Song, when you look back at pieces, even pieces that you think are successful enough to show?
Yeah, so like even for this piece, like the first draft of the second piece I didn't like, I learned a lot. Never mix Faber-Castell brush with a Micron 003 anymore. Like I learned. So like in a way, even though I might like attack my piece with a hammer and like, throw it away, I'm not like I don't feel betrayed by it. Like I don't feel bad that I spent 10 or 20 or like 3 weeks on something. It's time well
Definitely.
spent. So even though I might be angry at it, even though I got rid of it and no longer want to see it, like I never regret the time that I
So, how do
spent
you
on it.
explain how you made the transition from the piece you were so angry at to the piece that you actually finally decided was going to make it into the final piece?
So like I realized the first draft was too dark. I went like too literal and I kind of wanted to make the second piece more like poetic because the first piece was almost like it was in as like visually it felt very like metaphoric, but like actually it was very obvious Corona's outside. I am inside. I'm sitting down. Kind of like it was little like 1, 2 steps. So I kind of want to make the second piece a little more ambiguous because that is kind of the state that I am in. Like my head is just kind of cloudy. Like I'm physically okay. And like my family's safe, I'm okay. But then like my headspace is just kind of like foggy. So I kind of wanted to make that I wanted to kind of make it like an overgrowth, where like plants are just kind of growing over things. So I wanted to make my home feel like consuming, but in a very like peaceful manner. So it is kind of a contradiction. It's a very negative thought, but at the same time, I didn't want it to be a physically impacting kind of thought. Like it's not attacking me. I'm just sitting and I'm very foggy.
Jennifer is asking, how
Yeah.
large are these artworks? They look very delicate. How big are they, Song?
They are very small. These are like 8 by 8, 8.5 by 8.5. I have. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's like,
Yep.
can you see it?
If you hold it right in front of your face, we can see it. Yep, perfect. Does
Yeah.
everybody see? Really, really
Yeah.
small.
Oh, hello. They're very small. So this piece wasn't supposed to be like an artwork masterpiece. It was something that I wanted to kind of record, like a journal of what's going on with me personally. So they're supposed to be like snapshots, very quick, very fast, and supposed to be less stressful. But that first draft of the second piece just kind of ruined that
It
plan
didn't
for
really
me.
work out that way, I
But
suppose.
yeah.
George says, when I get frustrated, I immediately rip it or destroy it completely because I find it to be a block towards my creative thinking process. George, I do that when I write stuff. Like if I make a list and I think it's a bad list, I crumple it up. I don't know. It's like a sign of progress for me. It's a little bit strange. All right, Song, let's look at the third image, which is this one with all the plants. What was the inspiration behind this image?
So this one got rid of the chair entirely because I just kind of wanted to make all the happy thoughts kind of like take over. What makes me happy is taking care of my houseplants or just drawing plants in general. It just puts a smile on my face. It reminds me of better times. It also is, in a literal sense, I want to go outside kind of like statement. So I didn't really want the chair to hold all that back. I didn't want like some kind of folded chair to be in the corner or anything. I just wanted all the good things to just take over. But at the same time, I didn't want people to forget that the reason that we are inside is for our own safety, it is for our health. So like I did kind of put like little spots of corona like floating around, but I did play with the
Oh,
size. I
they're in the
didn't want it to be
back.
that giant thing. Yeah, it's supposed to be very
I did
unnoticeable,
not see
but
that.
it's like kind of yeah, it's a little like
You're right.
snowflakes.
Actually, the detail I'm showing now, do you guys see the little virus on the lower right hand corner? I totally did not see that. I guess I mistook it for maybe part of the foliage.
Yeah. So like and that's kind of purposeful too. Like I just really like I didn't want to downplay the virus. I didn't want to downplay the severity of of the reason why we're at home, but I still kind of wanted to show that it's still there. It's like a lingering thing. So versus like the first piece where it's this giant daunting monster that's outside, I kind of wanted people to like, yes, it's there, but then also focus on your health and be happy where you are, wherever, like however you can, like find things that will
Well, I do think
comfort
a
you
lot of us
because you
have
don't
been
know
through
when
so
this will end.
many transformations because there was that initial shock of, oh my God, school is done and we have to do this now. And so everybody sort of goes into panic mode. And then you start realizing, watching the news, oh my goodness, this is not going away next week. I mean, we're talking about the summer
Mm-hmm.
now. And I think a lot of us are coming to grips with new routines and new ways to adjust because we know it's not ending in a few days. This is something we have to start to live with for a little while. Luke K is saying that subtle corona detail works so well. Your work is so interesting and beautiful. Cool. All
Thank
right.
you.
So, Song, let's talk about some of your influences because you have a lot of artists that you look at, and it's extremely broad. I mean, you look at comic artists, and I know you really like manga, but you also like people like Gustave Doré. So, what is it about these artists that attracts you?
I think the main focus is line work. If like it doesn't need to be detailed lines. Like I prefer drawing detailed lines, but if somebody can do masterful work with a brush pen, I am in awe. It's just how people work with a single like line and how they create movement with these strokes. Like that really just it moves me. So like I'm just like and like this is getting corny, but like I can stare at that forever. Like painting, even like painters, I prefer seeing like impressionists where you could kind of see the strokes of the brush versus something that's like very finely rendered. It's just something I could physically feel like as if like the artist is like showing it to me directly of like what his process was and what his thought like thinking as he was like going through and building his image, his
Well,
or
I
her
mean, I
image.
do know that people would look at your work and say, okay, there are two-dimensional drawings, there are pen drawings, but when I think about your work to me is actually very sculptural. And I think a lot of these artists we're looking at, like we were just looking at Piranesi, and now we're looking at Arthur Rackham, these are artists who I think really think very dimensionally, and I think they think a lot about space. And I think that's definitely a theme in these pieces because you have this flat surface of the window, but the window really is just a divider for those two worlds. And that's what I think is really incredible is that you're articulating objects, but really you're talking about space. Sterling is saying, my hatch marks look pretty sloppy and inconsistent. Any tips or references? What do you think, Song?
I I think it should work with inconsistency. If anything, I'm very frustrated about how consistent my cross hatching is. I think it makes for a very clean artwork, but it doesn't make for a very emotional one. So in a way, I've been practicing doing more gestural, like contour line drawings because I get very stiff, and that's a habit that I picked up because of like the nib drawing, like nib pens. Like I didn't want to spill ink. I got really cautious, and it became almost a habitual thing to do very straight, very angular lines to create curves instead of just doing a curved line. So if you have inconsistencies with your work, that is a beautiful thing. That's something I think you can really work with and maybe kind of try to figure out how to make it cleaner in certain areas, but really highlight the parts that makes it
So you're saying
unique.
run with those flaws, like almost exploit them in a way?
Definitely. Yeah, I think like that's what makes kind of the artist unique. Like if you render something completely beautiful, like your skill and technique shines, but that's still something that a lot of people do. Like I will never say I'm a realistic rendering. I cannot like I will never be able to beat like a photograph. I'm not that realistic. I like my crosshatch, I like my detail, but I can never get to that point. But some people can, and some people really like thrive in it. But then if you can make like certain inconsistencies, nobody can copy that inconsistency. So nobody can copy what you call a mistake. So that is almost like your artist mark. So I think
I
you should
love
highlight
that
it
because I
personally.
do agree
Yeah.
that sometimes it's the quote flaws that make you who you are. Otherwise, it's too generic. So, Song, we're looking at Bernie Wrightson right now, who was pretty much, I guess, a comics artist. I like just discovered him today when you told me to look up the images of his work. And
Mm-hmm.
just talk to me about why you like his work because I think a lot of people wouldn't think that you would be maybe influenced by comic artists.
Comic artists are like one of the best references for pen and ink because that is their main medium that they use, and they are like usually like especially like famous like well-known comic artists, they've been doing that for 30 plus years, so they understand how to use this tool, how to make shortcuts, how to like make certain things happen where it shouldn't happen. Like I don't understand this magic, but Bernie, like he like especially his he's most well known, like for me at least I know him most for his Frankenstein pieces, but like he makes so much movement and dynamic motions with his lines. He doesn't really do cross hatching. Like there are some cross hatch areas, but most of it is just line width and variations of that, and then like the densities of lines. So you could really like there's certain photographs where like the Frankenstein creature or like the Frankenstein's monster is like hidden in a corner, and then there's like little beams of light that was just so subtly added in, but because of his line work, it's so dynamic. So it's very interesting to just study how he creates
Christina
movement.
is saying, Song, how do you keep the tiny tips on the micron pens from bending?
You can't avoid that. You really can't avoid that. I have a micron graveyard, and half of it it's still alive. But the thing is, the nibs are so dulled down. So like my 003 is like at a 02 because the nibs have been pressed down so hard, but there's still a little bit of ink left. But I do have a tip. Do not throw away old microns if it still has ink in it because you could use that for texture, especially like furs and then filler areas. You could use like a half dead micron to just kind of add like slight, like subtle hints of like line work where it's not so clean. But definitely kind of invest your money in getting new microns as well if you want that nice
I want to
pointed
see this
tip.
micron
Like there's a
graveyard
reason.
song. I imagine it's quite
Oh,
extensive.
really? I'll send you a picture. I'll send you a picture. I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of it. I'm like competing against like, no, I'm like imagining a competition between all these other pen and ink artists. I'm like, who else has a graveyard of microns and other pens? Like, let's just share our grave. It's kind of satisfying. Like, in a way, like one micron equals one piece. So it's like, I've done a lot of pieces in
George
pen
is
and ink.
saying, have you ever
So,
worked with India ink? I think by using the India ink by blocking in light to medium values sculpturally, then going in with pen for details and cross hatching.
see, that I would do if I knew what I was doing from the start. This is why, like, Clara loves to like picture me as like this like great pen and ink artist, and I'm so grateful. But like, I'm usually just winging it, you know. So like, instead of doing a lot of thumbnails and knowing exactly what this image is gonna look like, I have an idea, and I'm just a general sense of what I want to accomplish, and then I just go at it on like the final sheet of paper. So if I actually plan things out, then yes, I should block things out. I can definitely incorporate India inks and then figure out my highlights and just do minimal amount of work with the maximum amount of impact. That's a smart way to do it, and I wish everyone does it that way. But I'm currently struggling,
I mean, I
so
love the fact that you wing it.
yeah.
I don't think that things have to be that predictable or organized. And I think sometimes when people get too stuck into a routine or a pattern, you close a lot of possibilities down. So I think that that level of malleability in your process is a really, really good thing. All right, so we have a couple of questions from some of Song's followers on Instagram, which, by the way, you guys got to look at Song's Instagram and you got to follow her because, oh, her Instagram is so good. I love all her photos and she's got such great Instagram highlights. If you guys look at them, she gives tons of tips about pens and different brands and matte media. It's just like this incredible paradise of pen and ink information. So check out her Instagram. She also has a website, songkang.com. Also, on her website, there is a shop. There's all types of things in there, stickers and prints and lots of cool things. But let's look at some of these questions that people had asked. Let's see. How to get of an art rut and what motivates you?
So I think everyone can appreciate that question because we're all kind of in a rut in some way or form. My usual answer would be taking a walk outside. I love taking like going on hikes. I love going to parks. I like walking my dog, and that's how I usually de-stress, and that's how I usually get out of a drawing rut by kind of refreshing myself. But now that we can't do that, I think right now I'm currently doing a lot of smaller sketches. So right now, even on my Instagram, I've been doing very small, like maybe 4x5, like tiny little postcard drawings. Like I really just kind of want to refresh, kind of not be stressed out by each piece at a time. So instead of focusing on giant pieces of work that I feel very like kind of attached to, I kind of want to detach myself and then, make something kind of frivolous, maybe celebrate a holiday, participate in a drawing challenge. really do something that I don't feel inclined to make perfect.
Next question is, how do you take care of your body, as in wrist, hand, and back cramps? Which I imagine, with somebody who draws to the degree of detail that you do, has to be a problem at some point. So, what do you do to fix that?
Yeah. Luckily, I I just I just stretch a lot. Like I'm very active in my usual life, so like I do enjoy hiking. I like to go on jogs. So I do have that kind of I won't call myself athletic, but I do keep myself fit in a way. So every like 2 hours or so I do stretch, like give my back a little stretch, kind of stretch out my fingers. I do have a couple of little hand massage things, like grip helpers. I'm not sure what you call them really, but it's like helps with your hand grip. It's like harder rubber, like maybe it has like little spikes in it, and then like you just kind of like grip and then hold. You could do that with like a tennis ball, like kind of grip it and then turn your wrist around a couple of times, and that stretches it out. The most important thing I think is to do it frequently. So the advice from a professional would be like doing it every 20 minutes. You know, every 20 minutes of sitting and drawing stretch. I'm not quite responsible enough to do that. I usually stand up after like an hour or two, but still, more frequently you get up, the less pain that you'll have in the
When
future.
Willoughby is saying, do you ever use any white medium like gouache over the ink?
Almost all the time. So, like, if I'm using white paper, almost 100% there's some like white gouache or white gel pen over it because I've made mistakes even on these like three pieces. Like there's certain spots I went at it with a little bit of paint because there was a smudge that I didn't want. There was like a black spot that I didn't like, but it's kind of edited out during the photograph stage. But I do kind of address this in a lot of my like Instagram stories or like in my works in progress where people will see me paint out a whole block of areas to start over, and that's usually done with gouache or white acrylic or gesso. In terms of adding as in like not like correcting a mistake, but adding details with highlights, I also like to do that. But usually it's when I'm working on toned paper. So if it's like a slight beige, then I like to do black inks and then some white highlights to kind of even have a
But
higher
you know what I think you
contrast.
do, which is very unusual with, I guess, the white media, is that you don't try to hide it. Like we did that tutorial, the one that I have not released yet. I can pull up that slide right now. In this one, there was one spot that you painted over, and then you went and painted white in like six other spots. And I said, yeah, but you don't have a mistake in those areas, so why are you still putting the paint in those spots? And you were like, oh, well, if I just put the paint in that one spot, then everybody's going to see it. It's going to look like it's not supposed to be there. And I thought that was brilliant. I was like, wow, why didn't I think of that? Because then it looks like it's supposed to be there. Because you see that white gouache in 10 other places, it just feels like it's actually part of the piece. And so it's sort of like what you were telling somebody earlier about don't try to make your hatch marks more even, rather embrace that. Like if you're gonna put on the white media, show us the white media. Don't try to hide it. Don't you think that's where people get in troubles when they try to hide it?
Yeah, because there's always that one like keen eye that'll notice it. And then there's also that one person that'll always point it out. You know? You could like people will know and keep quiet, or like people will never know. But then there's some people who know and won't keep quiet. So just to pacify that and to like kind of like lift that pressure off your shoulder, I just like to make my mistakes very obvious. I like to announce the fact that I made a mistake because I don't want people to question me, like maybe at the later stage of my artwork, say, oh, wasn't this like this way before? What happened? Like, I don't want that like middle ground to be confusing. Like, I've made a mistake, but I fixed it and now it's better, don't you think? So, like, I am trying to continue the conversation rather than
Well, and also,
backtrack.
I feel like a lot of the qualities that you've gotten in your pen drawings that I think are very beautiful. Like you did this one, too bad I don't have a slide of it, of a mermaid that is like iridescent looking. And it's like you would never have gotten that to look that way if you hadn't done all this experimentation trying to fix all these different parts. Like that's just the coolest thing. Let's see. Wow, I can't pronounce this name. Nimbia? I can't say your first name. Sorry. How do you prevent ink smudges? Incredible work, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So there's a couple of different ways. So one, like you could just leave it to dry, but that might take time. Or like it also depends on the type of ink. If you're using India ink and you have like a puddle that needs to dry, definitely just leave it for an hour and then come back to it. But say that I'm working just with like micron, but I'm using it on top of like a slightly glossy surface. So say that I painted like a matte medium on it and then it kind of created like a slide, and then when I put ink on top it still smudges. At that point, you just need to have like a sheet of paper over it as you draw so your hands won't smudge. I like to use cotton gloves in certain times, but like it really depends. But like the most sure way is to just leave it to dry and then put a paper like paper or towel or tissue on top and then working on
Cool.
there.
Let's see. I guess we would like to know, what is your advice for a new artist, somebody just getting started?
I guess it really depends on like the study or like the major that you want to go into. So if we're just talking about drawing, please don't be so structural. I think like there is so many studies of like people doing like a step by step. You must learn how to do a pencil drawing first before you do ink, before you go into painting. And then like yes, theoretically it helps that you know all the basics, but then in terms of understanding a medium, really playing around with different types, mixing it together really does help. So like kind of helps you understand the limits of that medium more so than like how the medium works. So definitely there's no like bad way to start. There is a good linear way and then there's like this chaotic way, but they're both very positive. And I think also mixing mediums. I think even nowadays I still get some comments where like people are very like people are very conflicted when I say I'm just a pen and ink artist
Yeah,
because
you're
there's so
not just
much
a
going
pen and
on and
ink
they see me
artist.
do like mixed mediums. Yeah, so it's like even I'm conflicted. I'm like, technically, I shouldn't label this pen and ink because this has paint, this has markers, this has other types of inks. And so it's a very like confusing thing to categorize, but it does make for a richer piece. So I think just understanding the limits, but at the same time trying to figure out the loopholes around certain mediums might really advance your understanding of
I think
like
that's
of
really
an
great
art
advice because
tool.
I know a lot of people ask me similar types of questions, and I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, when I get good at that skill, then I'll learn this. And I say to them, well, why do you have to be good at this to learn something else? Why can't you try to tackle them together? Because in some ways, I think that does make you a more well rounded artist when you can tackle more things all at once. I mean, you have to do it within reason, obviously, but I just like how unstructured your thinking is, even though your work doesn't appear that way. It's really wonderful to see that. Wilson is saying, when it comes to art learning, I found it's best to know the rules, then do your best to break them in creative ways. Absolutely. It's all about rule breaking, right, guys? I hope you
Yeah,
guys will
just
check
like
out
yeah.
our new Discord server. Hang out with us there, have nerdy art conversations. The link is in the video description below. Please check out artprof.org. We've got lots of free goodies for you guys there, which are not available on our YouTube channel. And subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can join the Art Prof family. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who make all of this possible. Thank you to all of you guys for all of your questions, your comments, your thoughtfulness. Thank you, Song, for joining us. This will probably not be your last time here
Thank you for
because I like to hold on to fabulous people who are incredible and inspirational. So thank you guys so much for coming. Everybody, please stay safe. We will see you next time. Bye.